The 500,000-year war between the Klingons and the Galactic Federation was ended in just one day. A single day after humans arrived on the galactic scene, countless planets decimated, trillions dead, and in just one day, two battle-hardened warriors from opposite sides, a human soldier named Thomas and a Klingon named Ren, formed an unlikely alliance and stopped it all. Thomas Johnson leaned against the hull of his ship, the Cairo, sweat beading on his brow under the hot twin suns of the planet Kronos. He was part of the first human exploration team to the Andromeda Galaxy. He expected to find new civilizations, incredible technologies, wonders beyond imagining. What he found was war. A war that had raged for 500,000 years between the Klingon Empire and the Galactic Federation. A war that had claimed countless lives and left once thriving worlds as lifeless husks. He heard movement to his left and in one fluid motion drew his plasma rifle and spun to face the sound. 20 feet away stood a Klingon warrior, batleth sword in hand, staring at him with cold, dark eyes. They stood locked in a tense standoff, fingers twitching over weapons. The air crackled with tension. Finally, the Klingon spoke. "I am Ren, daughter of Morath." Thomas nodded. Thomas Johnson of Earth. He motioned to her batleth. "Nice sword, but it's not going to do much good against this." He flipped a switch, and his rifle hummed to life, glowing with barely contained plasma energy. Ren's eyes widened as she took in the human's weapon. She had never seen anything like it. These humans possessed technology beyond anything the Klingons or Federation had. Over the next hours, they talked. The war had stalemated centuries ago. The two sides were so evenly matched that neither could gain an advantage. They just continued the cycle of destruction, annihilation, retribution, on and on, with no end in sight. As Ren spoke of fleets of ships blackening the skies, of cities burning to ash, of the wounded crying out for loved ones who would never return, an idea began to form in Thomas's mind. A way to end this all, once and for all. "What if," Thomas said slowly, "what if we joined forces, your Klingon forces and our human forces? With my people's technology and your warrior prowess, we could launch an attack on the Federation capital, crush them decisively, end this war." Ren laughed harshly. "Ally with humans, alien scum? That is treason. The punishment is death." Thomas looked at her intently. "And if we do nothing? How many more will die? How many more centuries will this continue?" Ren was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I will need to convince the High Council. It will not be easy. They are set in the old ways." Thomas nodded. "But it may be your only chance, your only way to finally win this war." In the following days, Thomas, Ren, and the Klingon leadership debated fiercely. The risks were immense. The plan was audacious. Some dismissed it as impossible. But then a report came in. The Federation was amassing an enormous armada, 3 times the size of any ever seen before. Their target, the Klingon homeworld. The Federation was mounting a massive offensive to end the war themselves, by wiping the Klingons out entirely. Thomas looked at Ren grimly. "It's now or never. We have to act." The fate of the galaxy would be decided in the next 24 hours. The 500,000-year war was about to reach its climax. Thomas and Ren stood before the looming doors of the Klingon High Council chamber, hearts pounding in unison. They had come to Kronos with a desperate plan, a last hope to forge an alliance and end the ceaseless bloodshed. But as the doors swung open, they walked into a web of intrigue and betrayal beyond their darkest fears. Whispers of treachery hung in the air as they took their place before the council. Shadowed eyes watched their every move, and Thomas felt the weight of hidden agendas bearing down like gravity. As they laid out their proposal, a figure emerged from the shadows, Krav, the feared warlord, his voice dripping with disdain. "The mighty Klingon Empire, allying with human filth? Never," Krav snarled. "These outsiders seek to subvert our ways to make us weak." Thomas stood firm, meeting Krav's glare. "Warlord Krav, we come to you in good faith, seeking only an end to..." Lies! Krav roared, smacking his head on the chamber walls. Around him, a cadre of loyal warriors tensed, hands on their weapons. In that moment, Thomas and Wren realized the true depth of the corruption they faced. This was no mere political disagreement. Krav and his followers saw the humans as an existential threat to their power and would stop at nothing to sabotage the alliance. As the council devolved into shouting, Thomas and Wren were forced to flee, a storm of disruptor blasts dogging their heels as Krav's assassins gave chase through the winding streets of the capital. In the days that followed, Thomas and Wren played a deadly game, meeting clandestinely with council members, selling their vision of a united front while evading Krav's forces. They uncovered a trail of blood and deception, bribes and blackmail, leading all the way to the Federation itself. Krav, it seemed, was but a single strand of a web that had conspired to keep the war raging for centuries, a cycle of slaughter that lined the pockets of the powerful. The evidence they gathered was damning, undeniable. Bank records, transmission logs, hollows of illicit meetings, all painting a picture of a cabal that had played both sides, stoking the flames of war for generations. Armed with this terrible knowledge, Thomas and Wren took their stand. In a tense confrontation before the council, they laid bare the proof of Krav's betrayal, the warlord's face twisting with rage as his schemes unraveled before all. Slowly, the tide turned. One by one, the council members stepped forward, pledging their support to the alliance. Krav found himself alone, his power base crumbling beneath the weight of truth. But Krav would not go quietly. Backed by his loyal guard, he fled to his stronghold deep in the mountains, vowing bloody retribution against all who had turned against him. Thomas and Wren led the charge, a mixed force of humans and Klingons storming the gates of Krav's redoubt. The battle was joined, a whirlwind of steel and blood, disruptor bolts sizzling through the air as warriors fell on both sides. Thomas fought like a man possessed, his plasma rifle sending searing bolts into the enemy ranks. Beside him, Wren was a dervish of blades, her bat-leth singing a deadly song as she cut through Krav's elite guard. Together, they pressed forward, step by blood-soaked step, until they stood before Krav himself. The warlord was a giant of a Klingon, all rippling muscle and battle-scarred armor. He met Thomas's charge with a roar, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. They traded blows in a deadly dance, neither giving ground, until with a final desperate lunge, Thomas drove his blade through Krav's chest. The warlord fell, his tyranny ended in a spreading pool of purple blood. With Krav's death, the fight went out of his followers. The battle was won, the stronghold taken. The alliance had prevailed. But even as Thomas and Wren planned their next move, dire news reached them. A Federation armada, the largest ever seen, was bearing down on the Klingon homeworld. The corrupt officials Krav had conspired with sought to end the alliance before it could begin, to drown the promise of peace in a tidal wave of destruction. Thomas and Wren moved quickly, rallying the combined Klingon and human fleets. The plan was desperate, to intercept the Federation force before it could reach Kronos, to stop the attack before it began. The two fleets met on the edge of Klingon space, the dreadnoughts of the Federation squaring off against the birds of prey and human warships. The battle was joined, the very stars seeming to shake as the Titans clashed. Ships died in fire, warriors consigned to the void as the tide of battle ebbed and flowed. At the forefront were Thomas and Wren, leading the charge in their respective flagships. They bore the brunt of the Federation assault, their shields flaring, hulls buckling under the onslaught. But they did not break. The superior technology of the humans took its toll, the alliance slowly, painfully, turning the tide. With a final, daring gambit, Thomas and Wren led a strike team to the heart of the enemy fleet, to the Federation flagship itself. They carved a path through the defender's screen, disruptor blasts and plasma bolts clearing the way until they stood on the threshold of the bridge itself. With a nod, a grim smile, they charged, weapons blazing. They burst onto the command deck in a hail of fire, the ship's captain spinning to face them, face pale. "Surrender!" Thomas bellowed, plasma rifle leveled at the captain's chest. Surrender and end this madness. The Federation captain's face contorted with rage. I'll never surrender to alien scum. Thomas and Wren exchanged a glance. They needed a new plan. Fast. The comm systems, Thomas whispered. If we can broadcast the truth... Wren nodded. I'll cover you. Go! Thomas sprinted to a nearby console, fingers flying over the alien controls. Wren stood guard, her bat'leth singing as she fended off waves of Federation soldiers pouring onto the bridge. How much longer? Wren shouted over the din of battle. Almost there, Thomas called back. With a final keystroke, he accessed the fleet-wide communication network. Uploading now! Across the Armada, screens flickered to life. Federation crews stared in shock as evidence of their leader's corruption played out before their eyes. Bank records, secret communiques, footage of clandestine meetings with Klingon warlords. It was all there. What is this? A Federation ensign demanded, turning to his commanding officer. Lies! Klingon propaganda! The officer sputtered, but doubt had already taken root. On ship after ship, crews lowered their weapons. Entire battle groups powered down their weapon systems, refusing to fight for a lie. Thomas and Wren seized the moment. All ships, this is Thomas Johnson and Wren, daughter of Morath, Thomas broadcast. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. This war ends today. They led the charge onto the Federation flagship, cutting through dwindling resistance. Federation soldiers threw down their weapons or joined their advance. On the bridge, they confronted the Federation admiral. The man's face was ashen as Thomas held up a data crystal. It's over, Thomas said. Order your fleet to stand down. The admiral's shoulders slumped. All ships, this is Admiral Reeves. Ceasefire and power down weapons. I repeat, ceasefire. As the echoes of battle faded, Thomas and Wren stood side by side, gazing out at the assembled fleets. For the first time in 500,000 years, there was silence. In the days that followed, they worked tirelessly to forge a lasting peace. There were heated debates, accusations of betrayal from hardliners on both sides. But in the end, exhaustion won out. The treaty was signed. As the ink dried, Thomas turned to Wren. We did it, he said softly. Wren allowed herself a small smile. We did, but our work is just the beginning. Little did they know how prophetic those words would prove. As the galaxy took its first tentative steps toward peace, shadows gathered. On a dozen worlds, Krav's followers plotted their revenge. An explosion rocked a Federation outpost. Klingon colonies reported ships vanishing without a trace. Someone was working hard to reignite the flames of war. In a secure bunker deep beneath the new capital, Thomas and Wren pored over intelligence reports. Another attack, Thomas said grimly. That's the third this week. Wren's eyes narrowed. Krav's second in command. It has to be. Thomas nodded. We need to move fast. If we don't stop this soon. The alliance will fracture, Wren finished, and everything we fought for will be lost. They shared a determined look. The battle for peace had only just begun. The fragile peace Thomas and Wren fought so hard to achieve shattered like glass. Reports flooded in of attacks on both Klingon and Federation colonies. Outposts reduced to smoking ruins. Civilian casualties mounting by the hour. Thomas smacked his fist on the war room table. This has Morath written all over it. Wren nodded grimly. Krav's right hand. He always was the clever one. Before they could formulate a response, alarms blared. A Federation technician burst into the room, face pale. Sir, we've lost contact with Starbase 12. Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. Starbase 12 was their primary shipyard, vital to the Joint Defense Initiative. He turned to Wren. We need to... Another alarm cut him off. This time it was a Klingon warrior, his voice tight with barely contained rage. The dilithium mines on Praxis 4 are under attack. In the days that followed, Thomas and Wren worked tirelessly to quell the rising tide of suspicion and accusation. Federation admirals demanded answers for the shipyard's destruction. Klingon war chiefs bellowed for vengeance over their crippled fuel production. We must stand united, Thomas pleaded at yet another heated council meeting. This is exactly what Morath wants, to drive us apart. But his words fell on deaf ears. The alliance teetered on the brink of collapse. Then came the boldest strike yet. Thomas stood in stunned silence as he watched security footage of cloaked figures materializing inside their most secure facilities. Critical systems went dark. Classified data vanished. Impossible, Ren breathed. That cloaking technology. It's beyond anything we've developed. Realization dawned. The experimental device, Thomas said. The one your scientists were working on. Morath must have stolen it. As accusations of incompetence and betrayal flew from both sides, Thomas and Ren knew they had to act. They convened in secret, away from the finger-pointing and recriminations. We can't fight this war on two fronts, Thomas said. We need to cut off the head of the snake. Ren's eyes gleamed with understanding. Morath! They assembled their team in the dead of night. Elite Klingon warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with grizzled human special forces operatives. Thomas briefed them on the mission. We're going after Morath's command ship, he said. A dreadnought unlike anything we've faced before, but we have an ace up our sleeve. He nodded to a human technician who activated a shimmering energy field around each team member. Cloaking tech, Thomas explained. It'll get us on board undetected. For weeks, they pursued Morath's ship through the lawless fringes of space. The dreadnought struck without warning, leaving devastation in its wake. But each attack brought them closer. Finally, deep in an uncharted sector, they closed in. Thomas stood on the bridge of their stealth ship, watching as the massive form of Morath's dreadnought filled the view screen. All teams, prepare to board, he ordered. The strike force materialized inside the enemy vessel. Alarms blared as they fought their way through waves of Morath's fanatics. The bridge! Ren shouted over the din of battle. We need to reach the bridge! They fought their way up through the decks, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. As they neared their goal, a new sound cut through the chaos, a rhythmic beeping that sent chills down Thomas's spine. Self-destruct sequence, he realized with horror. Morath's trying to take us all out. They redoubled their efforts, racing against time. The bridge doors loomed before them. With a primal roar, Ren kicked them open. Morath stood waiting, a mad gleam in his eyes. Too late, he sneered. What followed was a blur of violence. Thomas and Ren tag-teamed the Klingon zealot, matching his strength with speed and teamwork. As Morath fell, Thomas sprinted to the control console. His fingers flew over the alien controls, mind racing as he tried to decipher the self-destruct sequence. Sweat beaded on his brow as the countdown ticked away. With seconds to spare, the alarms fell silent. Thomas sagged with relief. They had Morath in custody, but their victory felt hollow. As they applied every interrogation technique known to their species, the fanatical Klingon remained stubbornly silent. Whatever larger conspiracy he was part of, its secrets remained locked away, for now. For days, Thomas and Ren stood watch as Morath languished in his cell. The Klingon's eyes burned with defiance, his lips sealed tight against their relentless questioning. No amount of threats or promises could crack his grit. Thomas paced to the observation room, frustration etched on his face. We're getting nowhere, he growled. Every second we waste, his followers grow bolder. Ren's face was a mask of stone. A true warrior does not break under interrogation. It is admirable in its way. Thomas stopped pacing, his eyes fixed on a distant point. There might be another way, he said slowly. A human technology, still experimental, neural extraction. Ren's head snapped up. You speak of violating his mind? It's not without risk, Thomas admitted. But it could give us everything we need to stop this war before it starts again. Ren's hand clenched into a fist. It goes against everything we believe. To strip a warrior of his thoughts, his very self, it is dishonorable. And how many more will die if we do nothing? Thomas countered. How much blood on our hands if we let his silence doom us all? For long moments they stood in tense silence. Finally, Ren's shoulders sagged. You are right, she said, the words tasting like ash. We have no choice. The transfer to the human facility was done under cover of darkness. Thomas watched as Morath was strapped to the neural extractor, a spiderweb of sensors affixed to his skull. Beginning the procedure, a technician announced. Thomas gritted his teeth as he activated the device. On the monitors, Morath's brainwaves danced and spiked. The Klingon's body went rigid, a low moan escaping his lips. For hours, Thomas sifted through the torrent of data, decrypting neural pathways, unraveling memories. His eyes burned from the strain, but he pressed on. There! He shouted suddenly. I've got it! The information was staggering. Sleeper agents on a dozen worlds, terrorist cells poised to strike. And at the heart of it all, a massive dreadnought hidden in the depths of space. Thomas and Ren wasted no time. They assembled strike teams, coordinating simultaneous raids across Alliance space. On Rigel 4, they stormed a nondescript warehouse, neutralizing a cell moments before they could detonate a bomb at a major shipyard. On Kronos itself, they extracted a high-ranking official who had been feeding information to Morath's forces. But the true test lay ahead. Thomas and Ren led a team of their most elite operatives, racing through the swirling depths of a dark matter nebula. There, cloaked from all sensors, hung Morath's mobile fortress, a titanic vessel of ancient Klingon design. They breached the hull, fighting their way through twisting corridors. Disruptor fire filled the air as Morath's loyalists swarmed to defend their stronghold. Thomas ducked behind a bulkhead, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. Ren roared a battle cry, her bat'leth singing as she carved through the enemy ranks. Step by bloody step, they pushed towards the heart of the ship. The data vaults lay just ahead, promising the final piece of the puzzle. Suddenly, klaxons split the air. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow. Warning! An emotionless computer voice intoned. Reactor core breach imminent. Detonation in 5 minutes. Thomas and Ren shared a look of horror. They had come so far, only to face annihilation. We have to shut it down, Thomas shouted over the alarms. Ren's eyes blazed. There's no time to reach the reactor. We must evacuate. The ship shuddered beneath their feet. The choice before them would shape the fate of billions. Thomas's eyes darted between the reactor countdown and Ren's face. We have to go. Now. Ren nodded, her expression resolute. All teams fall back to the auxiliary shuttle bay. They sprinted through the twisting corridors of the dreadnought, the ship's alarms blaring in their ears. Suddenly, plasma bolts sizzled past Thomas's head. He dove for cover behind a bulkhead, heart pounding. Ambush! Ren roared, returning fire. A group of Morath's loyalists had emerged from a side passage, their faces twisted with fanatical rage. The narrow corridor erupted in chaos as both sides exchanged fire. Korath, Ren's second-in-command, charged forward, his massive frame providing cover for the retreating strike team. Go! He bellowed. I'll hold them off! Thomas grabbed Ren's arm as she moved to join Korath. We can't lose you both. Ren hesitated, torn between duty and loyalty. In that moment of indecision, a lucky shot found its mark. Korath stumbled, green blood blossoming across his chest. No! Ren's anguished cry echoed through the corridor. Korath's eyes met hers one last time before he crumpled to the deck. Ren's face hardened into a mask of rage. She raised her disruptor and unleashed a barrage that sent the loyalists scrambling for cover. For Korath, she roared, leading the charge forward. They fought their way to the shuttle bay, grief and fury fueling every shot. As the last of their team boarded, Thomas dragged Ren inside. We have to end this, Ren snarled. For Korath, for everyone Morath has taken from us. The shuttle's engines flared to life as they cleared the bay. Behind them, the dreadnought's reactor reached critical mass. A blinding light engulfed their view screen as the massive ship tore itself apart. The shockwave slammed into their tiny craft, sending them tumbling through space. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Warp drive's offline," Thomas reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're dead in the water." Wren's eyes narrowed as she studied the sensor readouts. "We have bigger problems. Look." A swarm of hostile signatures approached their position. Morath's remaining ships, closing in for the kill. "This is it," Thomas said quietly. "Our last stand." Wren nodded, her hand finding his. "Then let us make it one worthy of song." Suddenly, space itself seemed to ripple around them. Massive Klingon warships materialized, their weapons already blazing. At their center, a behemoth of a flagship dwarfed all others. A gruff voice crackled over their comm system. "This is Admiral Crador. Stand ready for retrieval." Wren's face paled. "Father." Before she could process this shock, the space around them erupted in battle. Klingon and human ships moved in perfect synchronization, carving a path through Morath's forces. Crador's flagship plowed forward, shrugging off enemy fire as it closed in on their crippled shuttle. Just as victory seemed within reach, a sickly green glow enveloped Crador's ship. Alarms blared as the bioweapon struck home. The massive vessel shuddered, venting atmosphere and debris. "No!" Wren cried, helpless to intervene. Through the carnage, they watched as a small craft launched from Morath's flagship, heading straight for Crador's stricken vessel. The final confrontation was at hand. Thomas met Wren's eyes. "We have to get over there." Wren nodded, her face set with grim purpose, to end this, once and for all. They maneuvered their battered shuttle towards Crador's ship, dodging debris and weapons fire. As they touched down in a damaged landing bay, the ship rocked with the force of internal explosions. "We need to reach the bridge," Thomas said, checking the charge on his phaser. Wren hefted her batleth. "And pray we're not too late." They fought their way through burning corridors, dispatching Morath's boarding parties with ruthless efficiency. Each step brought them closer to their nemesis, and to Wren's estranged father. As they neared the bridge, the sounds of combat grew louder. They burst through the doors to find a scene of carnage. Crador, bleeding from multiple wounds, locked in desperate combat with Morath. Thomas moved to assist the Admiral, while Wren's eyes locked onto Morath. The terrorist sneered, raising his weapon. "You're too late, little one," he taunted. "Your precious alliance dies here." Wren's response was a primal roar as she launched herself at her people's tormentor. Their blades clashed in a deadly dance, neither willing to give ground. Morath was cunning, using every dirty trick in his arsenal, but Wren matched him blow for blow, her fury and skill honed by years of war. In a lightning-fast series of strikes, Wren battered through Morath's defenses. Her batleth found its mark, burying itself in the terrorist's chest. Morath's eyes widened in disbelief as he crumpled to the deck. Wren stood over him, victorious but trembling. "It's over," she whispered. The medical bay hummed with activity as Thomas burst through the doors, supporting the bloodied form of Admiral Crador. Human and Klingon medical staff swarmed around them, whisking the gravely injured Klingon onto a gurney. "Get him to surgery now," barked the lead physician, her hands already covered in green blood. Thomas watched as they rushed Crador away, his own breath coming in ragged gasps. He turned to a nearby nurse. "Where's Wren?" "Isolation ward," she replied, gesturing down a sterile corridor. Thomas found Wren sitting alone in a sparse room, staring blankly at the wall. The Klingon's normally proud posture was slumped, his eyes haunted. "Wren," Thomas said softly, stepping inside. Wren looked up, his face a mask of pain. "Korath is dead," he said, his voice hollow. "My father lies dying. And for what? Was it worth this price?" Thomas sat beside his friend, feeling the weight of Wren's anguish. "I know it hurts," he said, "but think of what we prevented." He leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Remember Denbora Prime? An entire civilization wiped out in a day, billions dead. Or the Andorian colonies, 3 worlds reduced to ash." Wren's fists clenched as Thomas continued. We stopped that from happening again. Trillions of lives saved. Korath died fighting for that future. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Ren spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is my father?" Thomas hesitated. "He's in critical condition, but Ren, he asked to see you. He wants to make amends." Ren's head snapped up, surprise and conflict warring on his face. After a moment, he nodded. "I will go to him." They walked to Crowdor's room in tense silence. The Admiral lay still, tubes and wires connecting him to softly beeping machines. A Klingon healer approached, holding a small device. "We can induce a psychic link," she explained. "It may be your only chance to communicate." Ren nodded, steeling himself as the healer activated the device. The room faded away, and Ren found himself standing on a windswept cliff overlooking a turbulent Klingon sea. Crowdor stood beside him, looking younger and unbowed by injury. "My son," Crowdor said, his voice filled with regret, "I have done you a great dishonor." Ren felt years of anger and pain well up inside him. "Why now?" he demanded. "After all this time?" Crowdor's eyes met his. "Because I see now the true meaning of honor. You have preserved our people, our culture, through peace rather than conquest. I am proud of you, my son." The words Ren had longed to hear for so long struck him to his core. Tears stung his eyes as Crowdor continued. "Forgive an old warrior his foolishness," Crowdor said, "and know that the blood of our house flows strong in you." Ren felt the weight of generations settling on his shoulders. He clasped his father's arm. "I forgive you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Rest now, father. I will carry our legacy forward." The vision faded, and Ren found himself back in the medical bay. Crowdor's monitors flatlined, the steady tone marking his passing, but Ren stood tall, a new fire burning in his eyes. "We will rebuild," he told Thomas. "We will make this peace last." But fate had other plans. An aide burst into the room, face pale. "Sirs, we've detected Morath's bioweapon on Outpost Sigma-9. It's spreading fast." Thomas's mind raced. "We need that cure," he muttered. Then louder, "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our only shot." He outlined his plan to use neural extraction on Morath's corpse. Ren listened intently, then nodded. "Do it," he ordered. "Whatever it takes." Hours later, Thomas stood in a sealed lab, staring at Morath's lifeless body. He took a deep breath, activating the neural extractor. As the device hummed to life, he prayed it would be enough to save millions of lives hanging in the balance. Thomas's neural extraction device hummed to life, its tendrils snaking into Morath's lifeless brain. But as data streamed across the lab's screens, alarms blared. "Biosignature detected," a computerized voice announced. "Warning, mutagenic pathogen present." Thomas's blood ran cold. He slammed the emergency containment protocols, sealing the lab. "Ren, we have a problem." Within minutes, they stood before a holographic display of a volcanic moon. Red hotspots pulsed across its surface, each a potential outbreak zone. "Morath's bioweapon is leaking into the moon's geothermal vents," Thomas explained, his voice tight. "If it reaches off-world—" Ren's face hardened. "We must retrieve the body, immediately." They assembled their team with grim efficiency. Vralek, Ren's new second-in-command, paced the shuttle bay, eager for action. Lieutenant David Munoz, a human bioweapons expert, triple-checked his equipment. As their craft touched down on the ash-choked surface, the air itself seemed to burn. Visibility dropped to near zero as volcanic dust swirled around them. "Hostiles detected!" Vralek shouted. Disruptor fire lanced through the haze, forcing them to scatter for cover. Thomas ducked behind a rocky outcropping, the acrid air stinging his eyes even through his helmet. "Munoz, can you get a fix on Morath's remains?" The lieutenant's fingers danced across his scanner. "Working on it. This radiation is playing hell with our sensors." Ren's voice crackled over the comm. We'll clear a path. Vralek, with me. The two Klingons surged forward, their armor deflecting enemy fire. Thomas provided covering fire, his phaser cutting through the smoke. Suddenly, Vralek broke formation, charging ahead. For the Empire, he roared. Vralek, wait! Ren's warning came too late. A sickening crunch echoed across the battlefield. Vralek's scream of agony turned Thomas's stomach. Through the thinning smoke, he saw the Klingon warrior writhing on the ground, his armor dissolving as his flesh bubbled and twisted. Ren reached his fallen comrade first. Without hesitation, he raised his disruptor and fired. Vralek's suffering ended in a burst of energy. Press on, Ren growled, his voice thick with emotion. We end this now. They pushed forward, combat synthoids taking point. The crater loomed before them, a hellish pit of radiation and disease. There, Munoz pointed. In the center of the crater lay a charred, misshapen form, all that remained of Morath. As Munoz collected samples, a shadow detached itself from the rocks. For Morath! The cultist screamed, slashing at the containment bag. Thomas's phaser blast caught the attacker in the chest, but it was too late. The bag ruptured, showering Munoz in a cloud of contaminated tissue. No! Thomas lunged forward, but Ren held him back. We can't risk further exposure, the Klingon said, dragging the infected Munoz towards their shuttle. All around them, the ground trembled. Geysers of toxic steam erupted from fissures in the rock. The air filled with the howls of mutated cultists, their twisted forms emerging from hidden tunnels. Ren fired continuously, clearing a path to their craft. Thomas half-carried, half-dragged Munoz up the ramp as disruptor fire rained down around them. The shuttle's engines roared to life as the last of their team scrambled aboard. Through the view screen, Thomas watched in horror as the crater erupted, burying the nightmarish scene in a torrent of ash and fire. In the medical bay, Munoz convulsed, his skin already showing signs of mutation. Ren stood at the door, his own armor pockmarked with exposure sites. How long until we reach the containment facility? Thomas asked, prepping a stasis field. Ren's eyes met his, filled with iron will. Not soon enough, but we'll make it. We have to. The shuttle's engine screamed as Thomas pushed them beyond safety limits. In the medical bay, Munoz thrashed violently, his skin blistering and peeling away in ragged sheets. Hold him down! Thomas shouted, wrestling with Munoz's flailing limbs. Ren grabbed Munoz's shoulders, pinning him to the biobed. The pathogen's progress is accelerating. We're losing him. Thomas jabbed a hypospray into Munoz's neck, flooding his system with stabilizers. It barely slowed the horrific transformation. Munoz's eyes rolled back, his body seizing as internal organs began to fail. Ren's face contorted with effort as he fought to restrain their dying comrade. I know a technique, he growled. It's dangerous, but it may buy us time. Without waiting for approval, Ren pressed his palms to specific points on Munoz's torso. He began a guttural chant in Klingon, his fingers digging into Munoz's flesh with bruising force. Munoz's body went rigid, then slumped motionless. Thomas checked the bio-readings in alarm. What did you do? Klingon purgative ritual, Ren explained, sweat beading on his brow. I've induced a metabolic stasis. It won't last long. The shuttle touched down with a bone-jarring thud. Decontamination teams swarmed the vessel, whisking Munoz away in a sealed capsule. Thomas and Ren raced after them, stripping off contaminated gear as they ran. Inside the facility, Thomas plunged into work. He hunched over complex gene sequencers, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Holographic projections of the pathogen's structure rotated before him as he frantically searched for weaknesses. Days blurred together. Thomas subsisted on stimulants and sheer willpower. Finally, a breakthrough. He burst into the observation room where Ren kept vigil over Munoz's deteriorating form. We have a treatment, Thomas gasped. Synthesized antibodies delivered via retroviral vector. It's experimental, but... A shrill alarm cut him off. Inside the containment chamber, Munoz's body convulsed violently. Medical staff rushed to intervene as his vitals plummeted. What's happening? Ren demanded. The lead physician's voice crackled over the intercom. Catastrophic immune response. The cure is killing him faster than the disease. Thomas watched in horror as Munoz flatlined. The medical team fought to revive him, but nothing seemed to work. A cold certainty settled in Thomas's gut. There was only one option left. He turned to Ren, his voice low and urgent. We need to use Borg nanotechnology. Ren recoiled. You cannot be serious. To defile a warrior's body with machine filth. It's our only chance. Thomas cut him off. You invoked the Tangathar to save him before. This is no different. Ren's face twisted with revulsion, but after a long moment he nodded. Do it. But know that this crosses a line we cannot uncross. Thomas input his command codes, overriding the facility's ethical safeguards. A sealed container hissed open, revealing a swirling mass of microscopic machines. As the nanites flooded Munoz's system, Thomas and Ren watched with a mixture of hope and dread. Munoz's flesh knit itself back together before their eyes. Necrotic tissue sloughed away, replaced by gleaming cybernetic components. Hours passed. Munoz's vital signs stabilized, then strengthened. When his eyes finally opened, they glowed with an eerie blue light. Munoz sat up, flexing limbs now encased in metallic alloys. He turned to Thomas and Ren, his voice a disconcerting blend of human and synthetic tones. What have you done to me? Thomas stepped forward, his throat tight. We saved your life, David, but at a cost. Ren's hand rested on his disruptor. The question now is whether that life is still truly yours to live. Munoz stared at his hands, the metallic sheen of his new cybernetic limbs catching the harsh light of the medical bay. His fingers twitched, responding to commands that felt both familiar and alien. A constant stream of data flowed through his mind, analyzing his surroundings with cold precision. What am I? He whispered, his voice a discordant blend of human inflection and synthetic undertones. Thomas approached, his face etched with concern. You're still you, David. We saved your life. Munoz's head snapped up, his glowing blue eyes fixing on Thomas. Did you? Or did you create something else entirely? Across the room, Ren stood with his arms crossed, a deep frown creasing his forehead. This is not the way of warriors, he growled. To cheat death with machine parts. It's an abomination. Thomas whirled on him. We had no choice. Would you rather he died? Perhaps that would have been more honorable, Ren spat. Their argument faded into background noise as Munoz focused on the cacophony of information flooding his augmented senses. He could hear the hum of the ship's engines, feel the minute vibrations through the deck plating. Part of him reveled in this newfound awareness while another part recoiled in horror. Days passed in a blur of tests and examinations. Munoz felt himself slipping further from his humanity with each passing hour. He found solace in Ren's company, the Klingons' unwavering adherence to tradition, a stark counterpoint to the chaos in Munoz's mind. I fear I'm losing myself, Munoz confided to Ren one evening. These enhancements, they're changing me. I can feel it. Ren's eyes softened, a flicker of compassion breaking through his stoic exterior. You must fight it, Munoz. Your spirit is stronger than any machine. Before Munoz could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. They raced to the bridge where Thomas stood hunched over a tactical display. It's Morga, Thomas snarled. She's launched a bioweapon attack. Multiple systems hit, including... Munoz felt his synthetic heart stutter. My home colony? Thomas nodded grimly. Millions dead already. It's carnage. Rage coursed through Munoz, his augmented systems flooding with combat protocols. We have to stop her, he growled, his voice more machine than man. Thomas outlined his plan to infiltrate Morga's facility. Ren listened with growing disgust. This is madness, the Klingon protested. We cannot sink to their level. There is no honor in such tactics. Thomas thumped his hand on the console. Honor? Millions are dead. We're beyond honor now. As the two came to blows, Munoz felt something shift within him. The cold logic of his Borg components warred with his fading human empathy. He stepped between his friends. "Enough," he said, his synthetic voice cutting through their argument. "Ren, we must act. But Thomas, we cannot lose ourselves in the process. I'll lead a strike team. We'll end this, but we'll do it right." Hours later, they plummeted through the atmosphere of a volcanic hellscape. Ren's warriors unleashed fury on Morga's outer defenses, while Munoz led Thomas and a small team of shock troopers into the heart of the facility. They fought their way through winding corridors, the air thick with acrid smoke. In a cavernous laboratory, they discovered the horrifying truth: a pathogen designed to target augmented beings like Munoz. "We have to destroy it," Ren insisted. Thomas shook his head. "No, we need a sample, to create a defense." As they argued, a stray shot shattered the containment field around Munoz. A cloud of nanites engulfed him, tearing into his synthetic components. Munoz collapsed, his systems failing. Through the haze of pain, he looked up at his friends. "Don't let this start another war," he gasped. "End it here." The facility rocked with explosions. Ren and Thomas exchanged a look of anguish as alarms blared around them. The choice before them was impossible: save themselves and risk further conflict, or sacrifice everything to end the threat once and for all.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.